moderating this session on Queer Now. Yesterday I had a really good morning. I had a chance to go over to Capilano First Nation, spent some time over there. We are on Musqueam, Tsleil-Waututh, and Squamish territory, and it was good to connect with folks, really good people, really good energy, and as Harlan said, we're in their house, so just wanted to share that with everybody here. We're in a circle. I want to consciously name that this session we're going to do it in a more indigenous way. Not full, we're not going to go with full protocols and all that kind of thing. It takes a little bit of time to go through all that, but I want to name that we're doing it in a more indigenous way, that we're moving towards that kind of thing. I have spent many nights on phone, around fires, in different locations with several Two-Spirit elders, and one of the things that comes out the most is a message of not wanting to hide anymore, to be present, to really be within the circle, whether, a lot of times it's within Native communities, but in this particular situation it's within this whatever we're going to call it, this queer community, but to be in the circle and to be very present and to name it. So I'm going to name that right now, that's what's happening right now. Who am I? You know me as an artist, you know me as a director, a creator, but I'm also come from a line of medicine women, medicine men, and I'm also apprenticing now with people, and the way in which I hold this space is coming from those teachings as well. I mentioned when I was speaking on that panel that I spent a lot of time taking in things, a lot of time listening before I speak, and I just want to name, the things that have happened in the last few days. They're both necessary, different reactions, different emotions, are really, really necessary stuff because we're all here for a reason. We all have these things that bind us together, whether we call ourselves family or will call ourselves family or do call ourselves family, it's there. And within the bigger picture to move forward, working through all that stuff is really important, and that hasn't always been the case. So, for me, that feels really good. So in this session, I just want to emphasize things like listening, slowing down the pace, and just balancing everything out. Yeah, does that feel good to everybody? Yeah? Okay, sweet. So we're gonna start off this session. We're gonna start off with Mel.
So I'm Mel Hague. I'm the director of the Rhubarb Festival in Toronto, Everybody's in Bad Times Theatre, and the dramaturg at Everybody's in Bad Times, and I'm also the dramaturg at Obsidian Theatre, which is a black theatre company in Toronto. So the question that we were given is queer theatre now, who is making it, what is the content, who is deeming the content. So I think in answering these questions, I look around this room, and there's actually quite a lot of people that I don't know. And I'm not quite sure why you as individuals are all here. So what I'd like to do, I was given 7 minutes. And so I'm going to do a thing that I do instead of a talkback, because I hate talkbacks. I can't do it. So you have to now meet 3 people that you don't know in this circle. You have 2.5 minutes to meet 3 people, their name, where they're from, and why they're here at the conference. Because if you're talking about queer theatre now, this circle is a pretty good place to start. I'm going to time you. Because notionally I do have other things to say. So go. 3 people.
Yeah, they can't understand. And then they walk away with a lot of really positive signs. So, I'm pretty much
perspective as a mixed-race, white-passing person is a perfect entry point to speaking about queer issues, because I know that nothing is solid. I know that, like, all of my identities are so dependent on what you see when you look at me. Like, a lot of people would see a white person, and so I have to accept that as I walk into the room. As I do my work at Obsidian Theatre, I have to accept that when I talk about black theatre, that I'm perceived as a white person talking about black theatre. And so the theatre now, I think, is an increased awareness, a full body awareness of everything that you carry into the room, the power of the positions that I hold, the way that I look, the fact that I'm attractive, I know. It's a tool. Like, all of these things are tools that we carry into the room when we have it, that the more awareness I can have of all of the privileges and benefits, all of the privileges and benefits that I have walking through the room. I am highly educated. I have a very supportive family. So even though there's a weird thing going around on BuzzFeed that talks about whether or not you're privileged. And so I feel, and it's not an on-off switch. Because if I fill out that form, it says that you are not privileged, you live a crazy intersectional life, but I sit here very, very deeply privileged as a human being. And so when I work with playwrights, often young, often coming to their first moment of identifying themselves as an artist slash queer, as an artist slash person of color, because the multitudes of identities that we carry as artists, there's something inherently political about carrying all of the labels together under artists. The art is fucking critical to me. It is the most important thing. But the other identities that we carry and how I help people navigate that has to come from a deep understanding of who I am in this process. I don't know if this is this is not new, and I know that there are probably many, many, many dramaturgs who have done this. This is just the way that I have to be to feel that I have any right to speak to anyone about what their art is to be utterly honest about who I am and where I come from, and my blind spots, and my racism, and my white supremacy, and my ableism, and my homophobia, and my transphobia, which are all things that I carry because they are all things that I have been taught for my entire life. And it doesn't matter how many labels of that I can be a queer and still be racist. I can be a person of color, be homophobic, and vice versa, and all of these things, and they live in me no matter how many things I read. So queer theater now, for me, is about awareness.
I think it's Moynan's turn.
Oh, wow, that was a surprise. I was all laid back on the end.
Yes.
Hi, everybody. My name is Moynan King, and I am a theater artist, performance artist, director, curator, writer, and more recently, emerging scholar. And so my practice has transformed over my life, but all of my priorities seem to sort of circle around the same thing, and that is my questions about feminism, about my place, and the relevance of feminism in our contemporary society, which I think is high. And also, I think that feminism is a vital aspect of any queer ideology for a progressive future. And I keep saying feminism because I think it's actually the first time it's been said in this conference. I just keep repeating it. So today I'm going to speak briefly about a few things and show you a couple of pictures, which could or could not be a talking point later on. But my dissertation is called Queer Performance in the Post-Millennial Scramble. So I'm trying to theorize a concept of now that has to do with too muchness, that has to do with like a kind of disavowal of the post-queer, post-colonial, post-feminist time that we're presumably living in, and sort of challenging that, and then embracing the concept of scramble and taking pleasure in it. And so thinking about the multiple connotations of scramble is very much a part of my methodology. So if we think of scramble as making way over rough or steep terrain, or scrambling, to get somewhere quickly, especially using your hands, right, lesbians? Sorry, sex organs. Scramble to disarrange the elements of transmission. So something that I think is essential to the queer process and practice. And a random process of floating to the top, or a random collection of things. So these, all of these connotations I find really generative for parsing through my queer feminist identity and the queer feminist work that I'm looking at. And so my research right now covers work in Canada, Toronto and Montreal, only because you go into a dissertation thinking you can do everything, and you little by little go, nah, actually got to narrow it down, 2013 to 2016. So the three ideas that I want to drop into the room, and then I'll show you a couple of pictures, but I have a few central things that I just want to say, and that is that doing feminist performance now is not anachronistic. queer feminists are haunted by the divergent histories of feminism and queer, respectively, and that queer feminists are disappeared by their public representations, and those representations are usually monstrous. So this leads me to a specific project, and this chapter in my dissertation is called Collaborating with Ghosts. The project is called Killjoy's Castle, a lesbian feminist haunted house. And so I'm just going to show you a couple of pictures to give you a sense of if we want to talk more about it later. So this is the exit. The project was done in both Toronto and LA, and I was in the project as it's a monstrous collaboration, also I say, as one of the demented women's studies professors. So we were taken through this haunted house, which was an exercise in kind of disidentification, and it's not like, don't imagine a haunted house like, but with lesbian things in it. It's much, but do, right, at the same time. But it's more complicated, it's scrambled. It's like they take those elements and disarrange them all, and you'll end up with this crazy haunted house. So here's the outside, so this is from lesbian rule, like whatever. The rainbow, if you came to Toronto, you might recognize that from the DVP. That's where it's taken from. There's like a rainbow tunnel on the DVP. Anyway, the next picture. This is in LA, so this has been some of the other demented women's studies from Moynan, St. T. Smith, Carolyn Taylor, and that's me on the right, great ponytail. The next picture. Thank you so much, Peter. This is the paranormal consciousness raising room. So what this room does is it kind of looks at the consciousness raising room, which of course is feminist tactics gleaned from the civil rights movement, and it sort of takes that and turns it into a kind of feminist pro-sex show and tell. So a lot of the feminist ghosts from the past have been turned into stereotypes, so that we think of consciousness raisers as lonely housewives looking at their vaginas in their room. But really, this is an important political movement. This is tied to the personal is political. And so you have these performance artists with sheets over their head, looking at their vaginas, moaning in ecstasy. The smell is fabulous. Thank you. Here we have the polyamorous vampiric grannies. So this challenges the youth-obsessed culture of queerness. That sexuality goes on into all of our ages. And so here we there were a number of Dawnese dolls, and then this one live person wrapped. She's wrapped also in nylons. And the sign over the you can't see because I wanted a close-up picture, but the sign over the tableau installation was just not married. So the next picture. Here we have the ball bustas. So here we have a real kind of a disidentification with the image the derogatory terms that are hurled at us as man-eaters and ball busters. And so the room is filled with plastered truck nuts. So you know the truck nuts? Yeah, you're from the West, so you know the truck nuts. And they dangle on the backs of trucks. And so there were these two butch people methodically smashing balls, plastic balls. And then is that the last? Yeah, I tried to keep it so short. That's it. So thank you very much.
My name is Berto. I'll start by saying I'm a white, cisgender, gay, Italian, Irish, Catholic, American, Jew, Canadian of privilege. I know that's a lot, but that's what I am. I'd like to also acknowledge the unceded land of the Indigenous nations upon which we are here. And then I'd like to preface that I tend to think through the process of writing, and so here are some of the thoughts about my paper that is posted and how it got to where it is. Now I'll start by saying I had a prof in my very first theater course I ever took that said that all theater is based on conflict. And for me that seemed to make sense. So when it came for me to study queer theater, which was really the whole reason I wanted to study theater in the first place, this idea got even more true. And I found out that most queer theater was conflict between the things that I was had trouble with. These were things about the body, about the law, and traditions, and basically, if you have to put them in a box, it's basically about political shit. Stuff that now that I've done some academia and all that, that I have words for, and that I can label the sort of overwhelming hegemony of heteronormativity. Structures and practices that marginalized and contained and silenced us. Stuff that was basically about society in general. But this was like 10, 15, 20 years ago when I first started doing this. So now, in the last couple of years, 10 years or so in Canada, a lot of these things have stopped, or at least have lessened their grip. And in a lot of ways, our lives as queer persons have got better. There's gay marriage with GSAs and all sorts of things. So when Peter put out a call for this paper, asking about what there is to get angry about now in theater, I thought about the politics and structures and stuff that are in the plays that we're looking at now, and some of the plays that have come around. And I thought of 3 plays that really, really struck me as being something that resonated with the sort of ways I feel today about where queerness is and where it's situated. Or at least they presented a similar itch to things that have been bugging me. And so I wrote the paper, and I'd like to preface that I still think this paper is at the sort of first draft stage, but I figured out a few things. Anyways, I'll briefly go over them. I looked at these plays that were, initially, each one of them presented to me 2 different sort of subcultures, or at least 2 ways of being gay that were sort of presented at odds in each play. And in each play, one of them was marginalized, and the other one was somewhat more centric. And each play explored, to some degree, a problematic relationship between each of them. And this I thought was interesting, because, you know, as a queer group of people, we're supposed to be diverse, but the power politics of this diversity isn't always talked about. At least I haven't seen it much talked about until this conference, where it's been talked about a lot, which is good. Anyways, I'll briefly touch on the 3 plays I looked at. Small Acts was the most straightforward of each of these plays to examine. It almost appeared to me like an essay, like a play form. And in it, Andrew Kirshner plays a version of himself where he sets out to explore why a fellow actor, a Jamaican Canadian, stated that their 2 experiences as gay men could not be the same. And then Kirshner sets out to interview a variety of gay Jamaican Canadians and then construct their verbatim experiences into a kind of investigation into this difference. However, midway through the play, it becomes obvious that Kirshner, a white, cisgendered, seemingly privileged gay man, is not really the appropriate person to be doing this investigation. And as he begins to realize this in the course of the play's whole project falls apart, and we question more about his positionality than his subjects. And what the play neatly kind of shows is that the problems that occur when one presumes that their experience is somehow normative, or in this case, homonormative. And Kirshner's play fails, one could say, but in a good way, as its initial project is problematized, and this provides a very clear, if perhaps blunt, example of how the presumptions of homonormativity can steal focus and visibility from other queer subcultures. The next play I looked at was Pig. Pig is fascinating because it presents a huge continuum of ways of being for 2 or actually 3 men who are seemingly torn between the poles of expressing and performing their sexual desires in a BDSM pig subculture and the presumptive safe lifestyle of privilege, or one could say a homonormative life. And what makes Pig interesting is that neither of these poles seems to satisfy these men. Pig's critique of the homonormative is blunt and broad, and it states amongst many ideas that homonormativity equals the death of gay culture, and that the homonormative offers a false security against contemporary troubles. And what makes Pig fascinating is that it also critiques the eponymous pig culture that the men in the play also enjoy. And the characters are constantly searching for a higher level of authenticity, a word that's been bounced around a lot at this conference, within the performative role play BDSM that they engage in. And while this leads progressively to more perhaps perilous sexual recreation for the men, which nevertheless remains unsatisfactory to them, more importantly, it mimics the dissatisfaction that these characters have in the attempts at maintaining the homonormative lifestyle that they're also trying to maintain at parts of the play. My 3rd play is Tom at the Farm, which offers a set of contrasts between modern queer life that we see as we see a chasm of difference in visibility across an urban and rural, and also metaphorically temporal divide that the play presents. And what makes Tom at the Farm, I think, interesting is how it shows the main character is presented with a choice between staying, or at least going back, or staying in a repressive, violent, dangerous, and heteronormatively, violently masculine environment, or returning to his seemingly comfortable, privileged homonormative existence in Montreal. And when he chooses the former, the audience is forced to ask, what is it about this metaphoric step back in time that he takes and his embrace of a containing, homophobic, dangerous living that he likes, that makes him stay as Tom at the farm rather than Tom going back to Montreal? This play offers a variety of considerations to answer this query, but ultimately shows, I think most interestingly, a dissatisfaction in the homonormative life that Tom is expected to return to. Anyway, what I discovered through all these plays is that each in their own way is showing, to quote Bruce Cockburn, a trouble with normal, or in this case, a trouble with homonormativity. How much time do I have? Oh, you're not timing it? Awesome. This is really interesting. So I thought of all this stuff, and then I thought of my paper, and I thought, oh, my paper's when you're done, and then I read Laine's paper, and I read a bunch of other people's stuff, and I'm like, okay, how do I bring this back to theater and about what we're looking at more contemporary? So I grounded down to a bunch of questions about theater and who supports theater, who goes to queer theater, and so there's just a bunch of questions to sort out there. Do we see homonormativity as normative on our stages? And if we do, is this a problem? And if we do we need to critique it? Are we critiquing it? Obviously, these three plays we're critiquing it, but we need to critique it more. And if not, then do these pieces of theater still do necessary work for society in a broader sense? Are there any circumstances in which homonormativity is a good thing? I.e., and I know this comes up a lot, does promoting homonormativity in any way continue unfinished work vis-a-vis integration and acceptance of queerness into larger society? Is this work important? Do we still want integration into larger society? What is the relationship between our contemporary audience, meaning queer theater, and the homonormative? Does the homonormative model reflect our theater goers, our theater supporters, our theater donors? And I ask this question specifically because I go to a lot of the openings at Buddies where the board is there, and I see a lot of the people that are supporting and donating, and the banks that are donating money to Buddies, and there's a lot of people living a very homonormative lifestyle there, and a very homonormative lifestyle of privilege. So what are we doing when we critique homonormativity to our main resource audience? Do our theater goers and supporters of queer theater have any kind of expectation to see themselves or to see homonormativity when they enter a theater? And if so, should queer theater handle, critique, and address homonormative expectations of an audience? And if they do, when? At sometimes, nominally, never, or all the time? Those are my questions.
My turn? Alright. Just in time. How is everybody? I'm gonna make a little tree on the floor, and then when I look around and come around and look on it and see how far we reach. Alright? So just bear with me while we make the tree. Talk amongst yourself about the presentation. I'm serious, you know, talk with yourself about what you hear so far. Interesting.
I'm going to
at the light, Miss Merle, me kiss a black girl. I could see her and she could see me bright. No, me know it's taboo for true. Couldn't keep this information to myself. My first kiss with a girl, I'm gonna have to share it with somebody. Keeping it in would surely be a sin. I mean, I licked them, curled in toward me, and I never knew what licked me, and I'm trying, couldn't close my eyes because this was not like a kiss of wine. And then I can lick them tight, and pretend you was a princess and him is a knight. No. It wasn't like that this time. I wanted to feel when I let them touch mine. Feel remote juice intertwined, caress our teeth, caress our bone, taste this woman sweet. And another man, Miss Merle, me kiss a black girl last night. In the middle of the light, I could see her and she could see me bright. And I know it's a move true. But I couldn't keep this information to myself. My first kiss with a girl, I would have to share it with somebody else. And then, me take a stop dead in my trap, me nearly catch up heart attack. It's a black girl, me did a kiss. Her lip them brown and shine like mine. Her legs them strong and thick like mine. And with the absence of a dick, the power play was a trick. Cause there's no power play. Miss Merle, in some small part of my mind, I wish I could freeze that feeling in time and take it out when I feel oppressed and dispossessed. Because in this power structure, which part the black woman there at the bottom of the ladder? Miss Merle, me kiss a black girl in the middle of the light. And in that moment, me feel sexuality with a hint of equality. Miss Merle. So, for me, there's no separation between how I experience myself in my body and what we name gender, orientation, race, class, ability. And the way that I discern and the way that I embody all of these things that are necessarily separated so that we can get into them. The way that I experience them is as a whole being. It's a whole thing. And it doesn't, like that when I think of storytelling, I don't think of queer storytelling. You know? I don't. And when I think of storytelling, I don't think of Jamaican storytelling. Or I think of storytelling that is going to impact me and impact everybody around me. And allow me and them to find some way of understanding what their point on the planet is. And again, I completely understand and subscribe to us making these delineations so that we can have the conversation. But I need you to keep in mind while we go through this sickle journey that we're also thinking of the whole, the big picture. So in the years of trying to understand now, how am I going to change my colonial lens into a lens that comes out of my body? How am I going to look at myself in the mirror and not see an ugly black monkey? How am I going to do that? Considering all the stories that I've been taught over and over again. What am I going to do to know myself? And so I look to my elders. And fortunately enough, we have elders, right? And those elders, no matter how confused they are at times, manage to give us clues. And what I've done in the last 10 years or so is to try my best to distill these clues into a method that helps me and that helps the artists that I work with to form their own framework, right? So that it's about, yes, it's important to study, yes, it's important to get the knowledge from the outside. It's also so crucial to locate oneself in one's own body and decide for oneself what the hell the thing is about, right? So this methodology is called the Surplusi method. So I'm going to come close now. We're going to walk through it together. Right? We're going to walk through it together. Forgive me for the fine print. All right? It wasn't designed for a group of 75. So we begin. The artists who I work with and myself included, I study one principle a year So we begin at the very bottom of the tree, and it's a tree because the tree is the most incredible and most beautiful shape ever, right? So think of the roots of the tree now. I want you to think of your own roots, right? I want you to think of yourself planted in the earth and where you begin, right? So at the bottom of the tree it says, Surplusi is a holistic, intersectional, anti-oppressive framework emerging out of dub poetry and dub theta inspired by these elders that I've told you about. And it's applicable in so many different ways: personal growth, health intervention, organization building, conflict resolution, leadership development, etc. So that's like the definition, so we have a sense of where we're at, right? Then we move now, what are the main areas that we're focusing on as individuals, as human beings moving through our life? What is crucial to us? First, we begin with self-actualization, because our minds have been completely co-opted by these systems of oppression. All of us, like Mel mentioned earlier, like we all are racist, we all are homophobic, we all are ableist. Even if we participate, even if we experience being of color, being differently able, the fact is the larger narratives that we experience tell us and teach us to be oppressive, right? So no matter even this idea that me cannot oppress because me is a black woman is foolishness, isn't it? Because you talk to my 7-year-old son and he will tell you differently. My mother is wicked. So I want us to, where we begin in the session is we all admit that yes, we are human beings, incredibly flawed, incredibly oppressive to ourselves and to the people around us. Rigorous honesty. So what is self-actualization? What does it mean to self-actualize? And each of us have to define that for ourselves. What it means to you to self-actualize, what it means to me might be two different things. But there we get the conversation started, right? So we spend a very long time in this field, sometimes an entire year, sometimes 2, sometimes 3, and we explore all of these principles through this theme. The next theme is creativity. Now, how do we create? What do we create? What is creativity? We spend an entire year or more looking at creativity using the principles, and then the final section is leadership. The idea being, if we can negotiate ourselves and then move that negotiation into whatever we touch, the creativity is not just about play making and dance making. Creativity is everything. Creativity is about love making. Creativity is about planting seeds. Creativity is about building houses. Creativity is about cleaning the toilet. Creativity is about anything that we put our energy into, we are creating something because it's impacting the world, right? So we open up this creativity and get rid of these like dividing lines that are so hierarchically structured about who's doing what and who's not doing what, right? And then leadership, then we move into leadership. Leadership is anything that you do, you know somebody's watching. You know somebody's watching you. So this idea that no, I'm not a leader, I'm not leading anybody, is a farce. Because anything you do, someone is going to be affected. So we all admit that we are leaders. Even if we don't want to be, we are leaders, right? All right, so now we get into this part of the roots. And these are 3 of the basic meditations that we do in the session. The first one is draw a tree, because you know a tree is the deal. The roots are your core values, the trunk is your core life experiences, branches are your hopes and dreams, fruits, accomplishments, leaves, fears, falling leaves, experiences of transformation. Again, we have to know ourselves to be able to understand what we're doing to society and how we're impacting society. If I don't have any idea of what my little girl, little person experienced and how those experiences are affecting my decisions now, then I will perpetuate fuckery. I will. No matter what my skin color is, no matter what is in my brain, I will perpetuate fuckery if I don't have any relationship with the things that I've experienced in my life. It's inevitable because we're porous beings, right? So this is a meditation that we come back to. The next meditation that we come back to is sit in a quiet place and focus only on your breath. Imagine an illuminated mirror in front of you. Observe your reflection deeply in the mirror. Ask yourself, how are you feeling today? You're a human being. In a business, how much privilege and lack of privilege you walk with. You have to spend time with yourself. You have to spend time with yourself, man. How are you feeling today? And listen to the response. Now, Thank your reflection. Then allow the mirror to disappear. Now gently open your eyes and document your reflection. We're not talking about rocket science, we're talking about some simple human things. You see me? Then the final one is sit in a quiet place and focus only on your breath. Explore the outer skin, then the fascia, then the muscles, then the veins, and the bone and the marrow. You're going into your body knowing that nobody else now going at your body. You are going at your body. Continue to explore a single cell, atom, then subatomic particle. Feel the expanse of the particle as it opens to the outer universe. See the Milky Way, see Earth, see yourself. Re-enter your body now. Gently open your eyes and document your experiences. Again, this week, listen man, queer people are very sensual people, I'm being biased, but it's for a reason. We are very sensual people. If anybody's going to do this work, we can. Because we celebrate sexuality and we celebrate sensuality. We dare to say that we are taking up othered space. And it's a beautiful thing, but you have to go there. You actually have to go there to take the time to do that. So these are the main meditations. Now we get into the method itself. So the method has 8 principles. These are not original. They are not my principles. They are just 8 distillated ideas, okay? Principle number 1, self-knowledge. It asks 3 questions. Who am I? How am I? What is my purpose? Who am I? How am I? What is my purpose? You know we're all going to die. You know we all might feel a sense of fear about dying. So what are you here to do? What are you here to do? What are you here to contribute? For yourself and for me. Really and truly, because at the end of the day, no matter how much status and lack of status each of us has, we're going to dead. Okay? And so we all experience, whatever we experience as related to that idea that we're going to die. So we ask ourselves, who am I, how am I, what is my purpose? And each principle is related to a body. So this is related to the beyond body. Like, what are we beyond this? What are we beyond? I don't know. I have no idea. But like, that's very exciting to me. Like, what are we beyond this? Like, we're here now embodied, and we're asking ourselves this question, well, what are we beyond this? Then we go to the second principle, orality. What stories have I been told? What stories do I retell? What stories do I challenge? What have you been told about who you are? And what are you challenging about that? And what are you telling people? What are you telling people when you get up there, you start to talk, you do your play? What are you actually telling people? And is that a message that you would want to receive yourself? And that is related to the mental body. The mind, how is my mind working? How's my mind functioning? All right, the third principle, rhythm, heart. And that one says, what are my daily rituals in relation to my bodies? So what are you doing with your time? How are you eating? How are you sleeping? How are you feeling? How are you loving? How are you walking? How are you doing anything that you're able to do? Where in your life are you making time for what you understand to be balanced? Now you can imagine, if we're not balanced, no matter how much discussion we sit and talk about the theory of the this and the that and the queer performance and if you're not balanced, right? If you're not balanced, then what comes out of you is going to be not balanced, right? So, and that is the emotional body. Now, where are you as a human being emotionally? Now, how are you being held? But even more importantly, how are you holding yourself? How are you holding yourself? All right, moving on. Politics, political content and context. How do you use your power? Mel alluded to this earlier. How do you identify how you use your power? I identify as a mother. When I'm in certain situations, I abuse my power. I abuse my power. And if I'm not honest about that, then I might go around telling people the story that I just do my best, I don't have any power and you know it. Right? When I know that behind closed doors at my house, I abuse my power, the minute I feel threatened or the minute I feel impatient to work something out, that is the reality. Do you know what I'm saying? So how do you use your power? And that body is the crown. What personal identities do I subscribe to? What contexts impact these identities and dynamics of power? How do I behave in these contexts? Trace the behavior to roots. All right, moving on. Language. Do I say what I mean and mean what I say? Simple things, not high science right here. What do I say? How do I say it? Why do I say it? Is what I say connected to my core values? Remember the tree that we drew? Core values. Do I say what I mean and mean what I say? That is the community body. The community body. Like, how am I relating to community? You know what I'm saying? Whether we like it or not, we're on one planet together. You know what I'm saying? Whether we like it or not. Whether we like it or not, we live on this land that is stolen land. And everybody who's here on this land that is not of the indigenous, we're participating in something. Do you know what I'm saying? Whether we like it or not, I am accountable, I am responsible. Whether I like it or not, it's not about if I like it. Okay, I am still here and I'm benefiting and I am participating. So therefore I am responsible. Do you know what I'm saying? We have to be honest with each other. All right, moving on. Urgency. The solar plexus. Urgency is talking about what does urgency mean to me? What is urgent in my life and how are my urgencies connected to my core values? So again, you find yourself working on things that are not urgent or the things that are urgent in your life you don't have no time for, then what kind of life are we living? How is that going to work out knowing that we're going to dead? So what is urgent to you? That is the economic body, because some you know how the economic body is. And we have to negotiate these urgencies with these economic realities. It is a reality. But we have to be geniuses. We have to be creative geniuses that we can look at our integrity, we're getting there, and negotiate these urgencies and negotiate as best as we can, not perpetuating the fuckery. Sacredness, sacredness, sacredness. No, so who said that if we're atheists, we can't believe in sacredness? Are you for real? So being atheist and not believing in the God that we were taught as children means that we can't believe in the sacred? You have to define what is sacred to you. What is sacred to you? I promise you that if you can define and identify what is sacred to you, your actions will follow accordingly. But if nothing is sacred to you, then anything goes. That is the creative body. Creative body. And then the final one is the root, integrity. So all of these ideas, again, not original ideas, boil down into the root, your roots. You are integrity. Why are you integrity? Because you are an embodied being. You are a whole being. You are not, and when I look at you, I don't see piece of that, and then I see your skin color separate from your nose, separate from your legs, separate from your eyes. I don't see that. What I see is a whole entity. So you are integrity, we are integrity. So now, how can we then live the integrity that we already are? It's not like we have to climb towards it. We already are it. We already are there. You know, and that's a final principle. These cards on the end are just little sayings that have come up over the years that are really nice. The aim of mentorship is to empower the mentee with the tools to mentor themselves. To begin shifting your perspective, notice your humility, your gratitude, your breath. Paying close attention leads to self-mastery. It's that simple. Breathe deeply, feel fully, act compassionately. Personal liberation is an essential component of community cultivation. Dare to live what you dare to teach. If you're not living it, don't teach it. You are already complete. You are already complete. We are the combination of all of our ancestors, all of our relations, all that has gone before us, all that will come after. Meditate, study, serve. In order to nurture a healing tree in the world, I must first plant seeds in my soul. When I speak or act harm into the world, my own ears also hear my words, my own body experiences my actions. I own nothing, the world owes me nothing, I too shall pass. We don't own anything, eh? We don't own anything. And the world don't owe us anything. And we will die. And that's very important to remember. Leadership aims at fostering communal, accountable responsibility for the planet and all of its inhabitants. Even the ones you don't like. A visionary supports others in identifying and embodying their internal and external liberations. So this is, for me, when I think of queer performance, I think of the whole thing together, and I think more specifically about how I can help myself, and how I can help us together, and how we can help each other together, to begin with self, so that every work that we're doing, all the academic work, all the personal work, all the creative work, is emerging out of a fiery center, like our East Asian family tells us, a fiery center at the core of the second brain, and that we're impacting each other from that place of love and possibility. Yeah.
I'll just take a second, let's take a moment to sit with yourself and just absorb what all was said in the room for a moment. The eastern door is open as well, so ancestors are here with us as well. So sit with your ancestors too. Okay. David, do you want to go? Yes.
Hi, I'm David C. Jones. You're at the opening cabaret. I'm just going to read out my statement that I posted, so you haven't seen that, and I might maybe summarize off that a little bit. I actually wrote this, as I said there, the day after the Orlando shooting, so that was sort of really in my brain as I did it. So I feel one of the things that's important for us is to be political in the now. We must empower people, politicize our challenges. Very, very low that. The forces of evil twist the words and try to take over the message and make it about them. We can't be passive and about attention. We need to claim our pain. Stop being polite in our storytelling. We need to shout out loud and own our stories and not worry that they will be accepted, not be concerned that straight audiences will relate to them and find them enticing. If our own stories, and many of them are ones that queer audience will get only, and that's okay. I personally love seeing a film or a play that is so specific to my community that I'm profoundly honored and grateful to have them spoken to. They're not trying to make it so that it speaks to everyone. Yes, some of our stories have universal connection, are relatable to a wide section of society. Those are important too, but we must not shy away from our own attempt to be accepted or to make people feel comfortable. The other thing that really pisses me off, I'm sorry I'm being so negative. A little louder? Okay. Sorry. One of the things, particularly when we write issue-oriented theater, we often will make especially if it's obviously a queer issue, we write issue-oriented theater, we often will then paint the queer character as noble, as nice, as put upon. And it's because we're trying to get the issue across, but it's also making the character whiny and one-dimensional and not relatable. And the piece only ever stands as an issue-oriented piece. Particularly, I've seen a couple shows recently, newer scripts, and they were, one was a musical, which is about religion and gay people, and the poor gay people were just like, oh, the religion, the religion. And so it was like, oh, this character is so boring. The other thing that's really important to me, and I can probably speak without reading, is diversity. It became an issue when I was serving on the Equity Advisory, when we did in Vancouver outlined look at casting practices. We went to 6 different theaters and we looked at all the programs and looked at what the casting practices were for 10 theaters, and then we released our findings. And one of the people who was on that panel, who was non-Caucasian, said that we also need to subtract out when the people were playing criminals, hookers, or magic people. And what was really interesting, one company, I can't see the name, it was a blind study. But they, if you're from Vancouver, you might be able to figure it out. They did Midsummer Night's Dream every other year, and every time they did it, Puck was a non-Caucasian actor. Right, but never one of the lovers. Right. So, since I went into that as an advisor, I was tasked with this thing. So it was not something that was on my radar. It wasn't something that I was aware of. But since I did that study, it became it just seemed wrong. So it became a huge cause for me. I sometimes write reviews for OutTV on their blog, and for 1 year I called out, just in print, whether it was an all-white cast or a diverse cast. I had no political statement around it. If it was just talking about the show, I said the all-white cast did very well. Right? Or the diverse cast were astounding. I just named it like that. And I got a lot of people getting mad at me, sending me notes. But why did you say my cast was all white? And it's like, well, because it was. I said nothing else about that. I said it was good, right? I stopped doing it because I was getting tired of people getting stressed out about it. The other thing that I started doing, and then I stopped because I'm sensitive, is I see a lot of fucking theater. 3 or 4 shows a week. And so I started counting the faces there. And so I started to do it and post it on local Facebook groups and stuff. This is what your unofficial tally was. And I would do it in 6 months setting. So I go, for example, I saw, in this month I saw 12 plays. That's 122 actors that I saw. 17 of them were visibly POC. Right? And then I would also tally out whether it was a show that had diversity in casting, or whether inclusiveness in casting, or if it was a completely all non-Caucasian show, because someone said that would be important to note too. Almost always the only time it was an all non-Caucasian show, almost 100% of the time, was if it was a one-person show. Right? Well, yes, this technically was an all diverse show. Right? They were the only one in there. It makes me nuts. I said in my statement, and I loved the show so very much, but I loved it so much, but I got so upset when I saw the Gay Heritage Project, because it was 3 white guys, and they kind of comment about that. They state it, but it was like, well, there was an easy way to solve that. There was a super easy way to solve that. Rather than going, oh, poor us, we're all white, oh, we feel so ashamed. It was like, when you were rehearsing this, and you knew to write that, you could have fixed it at that point, right? It would have been very easy for you to find another person, another two. And last thing I'll say is the other thing that I maybe 2 things I'll say. Then I don't know what I'm saying. I'm tired. Diversity or inclusiveness, diversity is a bad word, representational and inclusive casting can't go to tokenism. And what's interesting is in Vancouver we called that out in print. So now often there's 2 black people in the show. We're not being token. No, you still kind of are. Right? But it's like, well, okay, the message is getting out. I suggested 2 report cards similar to the one that I already do. One which is calling out artistic directors or directors specifically, saying, here is your report card. People found that a little bit, I don't know. But I have noticed there's been a shift in directors when they get the message, and they go, okay. So it can also be done as a reward. The other thing that I think is really important that so I'm speaking generally not just to LGBTQ, but it happens in LGBTQ as well, is we also have to call out our younger cousins in community theater and school theater. Because often one of the things that happens for young actors in particular is a stepping stone to getting into professional theater is to do some community theater, is to start there. And often those shows are all Caucasian. There's a production and of the female version of The Odd Couple. Now, I can feel a bit smug because I directed a production of it. I had a very diverse cast. But the Consuelo brothers, the Pigeon Sisters become the Consuelo brothers. It was the 80s, so the characters are written so they speak Pigeon English. In our production, we had 2 Latin actors playing the Consuelo brothers. But this new community theater production is 2 white actors basically pretending to be Latin. And it's like, I'm going to be calling that director and saying, hey, let's go for coffee. Right? After the run, I can't do anything now. They're getting ready to open. And I do that a lot. I've sat down with directors and said, can we just have a meeting and talk about your show. Laine Entertainment, there I named them. They do big musicals. They're a community theater called Community Theater Musicals. And I commented in a review, there were more, why do I see more people of color in the lobby working as ushers and concession stand people than I do on stage, where they would have, of their cast of 35, only one Asian in the chorus. Which I wrote a song about called The Asian in the Chorus. But I won't sing it for you now. I think I've said all I need to say. That's what I think is very important in the now and in the future. Thank you.
Sunny Drake.
Oh, keeping us on our toes, okay. All right, let me just, I'm going from hot, cold, hot, cold. Yeah, hello. So my name is Sunny Drake, and I am a theatre writer, creator, performer. Also last September I just started in the role of Director of the Emerging Creators Unit at Buddies at Bad Times. So I did that part of the year as well. And yeah, very appreciative to be here, and I want to pay my respects and thanks to the First Nations communities of this land and acknowledge the unceded Coast Salish territories we're on. And I'm going to read you sort of like a summary version of what I posted online, which is called To Glow or Not to Glow. It is some thoughts about self-censorship. So some of the sort of stuff that I'm thinking about in my practice at the moment. So I'm going to tell you a couple of touring stories to talk about self-censorship. So I'm on tour to a small Canadian city, population 20,000. This is the first show ever by a trans artist programmed in the theatre's main season, and I think potentially one of the first few ever with explicitly queer content. So that's the context. When I burst onto stage in front of the 250 mostly straight cis audience members, I'm super thankful that the audience are really quick to warm, and I feel like pretty soon, like, we're becoming BFFs, where, you know, it's going really well, and then we get to that point in the show. So it's the part where my character gives a blowjob to his priest. But in a queer context, like, the scene is not particularly outrageous. I mean, the blowjob is to an imaginary character. There's no props, like not even a banana. You know, I'm about to do the scene, and I sneak a peek at the audience, and they're leaning in, and their faces are open, and they've been in love with the puppets and the quirky characters, and we're just having this really good time. And in that moment, my desire to feel connected and to be liked presses in on me, and I freak out and skip the blowjob. Okay, so that kind of leaves me with my question of, like, you know, was it a big deal that I self-censored that part in the show in that moment? I mean, on the one hand, it's like I aim to have conversations with my audience, and in that instance, the blowjob felt somewhat peripheral to the conversation that I wanted to have. The artistic director who booked the show said she'd been nervous about how her audience would respond, but she wanted to challenge her audience, and after the show, she got a bunch of calls from her more conservative audience members saying that they totally loved the show and they'd been really stretched and challenged by it, but in a really good way. So I guess the questions I'm left with are then, well, would they have loved the show if the blowjob had been in it? Is it even important that they loved the show? Would the blowjob have alienated some of them who were already working really, really hard to meet me in a place unfamiliar to them? By trying to connect with the majority, did I fail to connect more deeply with the few queers, or indeed the few straight folks in the audience who are dying to see some smutty stuff on stage? And how much, like, can I strip back from my characters before they become like skeletons devoid of the flesh of life? And I mean, I think at the end of the day, like, to blow or not to blow in that particular situation is not really that big a deal. But what concerns me more is the potential for those sort of self-censorships to slip into bigger ones. So an edited out blowjob here or there becomes, oh, maybe I'll just make this character a banker instead of a sex worker because they'll be way more relatable. slips to, oh, one gay character or one trans character is enough in the play, right? And then slips to, oh, look, let's just put on Romeo and Juliet, shall we? So just that kind of potential for that slide, and I don't want to wake up one day so stripped back that I can't even recognize myself or my own community, which, you know, there's a lot of people being talking about, you know, homonormativity, etc. But also having said all of this, like, I don't think that there's inherently something wrong with self-censorship, period. And I'll give you another example from training experience as well. Okay, so this time I'm in a 2,000 person town. I find out the day of the show that the local high school wants to bring 2 classes, and I'm like, oh my fucking god. So okay, I rapidly take out the blowjob, and I also make a few other text edits because I really want the classrooms to be able to come along. And to give you the context, it was the first play of any kind, let alone a queer theatre play, the first play of any kind that most of these students had ever seen. They lingered after the show, and we had really good conversations about drinking and sobriety, and they talked about wanting to make their own play about the stigma that they're facing as Indigenous young people in the North. And I feel like even in this case, even though I didn't originally make the show with young audiences in mind, like, the compromise of my integrity in that case would have been to actually refuse to adapt or self-censor the show, and therefore miss out on this opportunity to have this really awesome connection that I'm deeply grateful for. So I guess, you know, just to kind of complicate that. And then, you know, I think, so it's okay, sometimes I do want to speak to my own community in a no-holds-barred way. I do actually believe in the importance of preaching to the choir. Like, I think that queers of all different backgrounds and all members of our community deserve nuanced work that not only reflects our realities but also stretches those reflections and provides us with nourishment and healing and strengthening, etc. And then other times when I either want to or need to speak to a broader audience, I also want to remember, like, you know, so I've toured pretty extensively. I've toured to 55 cities across the world, and in my touring experience, I've actually had my own ideas of what a mainstream cis straight audience will let you get away with. So I think I've actually put a lot more barriers, you know, than what I need to necessarily. I found that theatre presenters are vastly more conservative than their audiences. And yes, I have definitely come up with some challenges. Okay, so I've been in a small conservative city where the subscribers literally protested to the theatre company just for programming my work. They hadn't even come and seen it, just for programming a queer and trans artist in their season. I also had another venue in a small Canadian city refuse hire for my production. So yes, I've come across some challenges, but I think it's worth noting that in those exact same communities where there was vocal opposition, there was an overwhelming, and in fact, especially in those communities, there was an overwhelmingly enthusiastic response from both the queers but also the straight cis folks who did come along. Like, I feel like in those sort of spaces, there's this kind of particular quality of laughter, which is sort of a little bit like, old ladies sitting in the front row. You know, and I think that, like, we can actually get away with a lot more than what we think, and I want to push back on my own assumptions of what audiences are and aren't up for. And then I want to also complicate that further by saying that whilst, yes, we can get away with more than what sometimes we think, I also want to be careful of not being seduced into needing mainstream validation. You know, and I think that there's been a bunch of conversation about this, and I think we can really learn in our theatre making and performance making from what's happened more broadly in queer rights movements, like, you know, how, like, learn from the mistakes of how we went from Stonewall, like a bunch of incredible trans women of colour and sex workers on the front line with really radical grassroots agendas like, you know, addressing police violence, poverty, trans women's safety. Like, how do we get from that to a movement dominated by white middle-class gay men who, you know, have pushed for the, like, kind of gay marriage and entrance to the military, etc. And there's been a bunch of conversation about this, and I just kind of wanted to add into that conversation some things I've heard Miss Major say, who's a black trans woman, incredible activist living in the Bay Area, who was also on the front line of Stonewall. And she says, she gives 3 reasons why the movement kind of turned in this direction and got co-opted. So one being that white middle-class gay men we're hell-bent on presenting an image that would appeal to the mainstream. So, you know, and when we censor ourselves down only to those parts that are acceptable, we lose the rest of ourselves. We also throw a heap of people under the bus, and I know people have been talking about that a bunch. Another sort of fairly obvious one also, white middle class men have more resources, power, etc. So I think that puts the onus on us to really figure out how and where are we directing our resources. And three that I don't hear talked about very much, this is once again from this major, is the ways that the co-opted movements failed to learn how to work with and centre folks who are struggling with substance use, drinking, drugs as a way of coping with being super marginalised. So like, let's remember, for example, incredible revolutionaries like Sylvia Johnson and Sylvia Rivera and Marsha P. Johnson were actually banned from organising and arts and cultural spaces for either drinking or substance use. So I think that's something we really have to put into the space and grapple with. And as an alcoholic who's been sober for 4 years, there's also the flip side of that, of supporting space for sober folks. And I've written an article called Wet Dry about juggling both drinking user and sober rights, if anyone's interested in that. And I think, the last thing I kind of want to say is, I guess sort of directed to myself and other white folks around, like, why would I kind of want to and be invested in doing work, to try and consider and make sure that we're directing resources, etc., and thinking about how we can centre BIPOC voices in our queer theatre, etc. And one is like, so obvious, the obvious answer is yes, I am interested in, I want to challenge inequalities, etc. I also want to kind of put out there that, of course, yes, I experience guilt, shame, like a bunch of other kind of stuff like that I work with to address. But also, it's not actually about coming from a place of guilt and shame. It's about, I love myself so much that, I want to, I want to recognize and see, what do we lose when we have spaces that are heavily dominated by white and male voices, including myself. We lose so much richness. And the more and more I get involved with projects that don't necessarily just centre white male voices, like my life is way more awesome. I get to be involved with way more exciting stuff. And I think all our kind of social, change agendas, etc. We are actually not going to win without centering the people who know the shit back to front, the strategies, etc. of how we're going to kind of tackle and take on these systems. So I guess I just, kind of wanted to put that out there in the space that we also, to myself and other white folks in the room, that we can actually come to that from a space of self-love rather than a fear of what we're going to lose. And I've written a couple of resources around that called Racism is to White People as Wind is to the Sky, if folks want to check that out. Yeah, thank you.
On June 28, 2016, Black Lives Matter Toronto published this post on their Facebook page to address the anti-Black racism they experienced when they protested the unveiling of the police LGBT mural in Toronto.
What is your name?
Sorry, I'm Laine. I begin here so we can be clear. Anti-Black racism in the queer community exists and needs to be actively combated. I could easily begin with celebration. It's clear that in the performance industry, massive strides have been made. There are incredible works by people of color that need to be celebrated, promoted, and more widely produced. I could begin by discussing the incredible representation at this year's Dora Awards and Jessie Awards, and note the improvement from the Jessie's dismal display last year. I could tell you about the improved gender representation on Canadian stages in the last year, with women's work being produced 2% more than in the previous season. But instead, I'm starting here, because as a white person speaking to the other white people in the room, I feel the need to say that we should be ashamed. But instead of saying, I would never, "I'm so sorry," or "That's not me." We should be saying, "I am accountable. What must I do? And how do I address this kind of oppressive anti-Black racist response?" It's alarming that since first writing this paper and submitting it online, I have to keep updating it for today's talk. I have to keep adding multiple new examples of the ways in which white queers' anti-Black racism is impacting the queer community in Canada. Racism, as many have noted, is not a problem that the Black and POC communities need to address. It's a white problem, and white allies need to be responsible for educating themselves and each other in order to address it. So I wanted to think about this and how it's impacting the queer theater community today, and how it's changing our experience of theater and performance, or how should it? In my paper, I considered the false notion of the monolithic queer theater, which erases the distinct oppressions and privileges many queer folks experience, the universalization and neutralization of patriarchy, whiteness, and settler colonialism. So my objective in my paper was threefold: to interrogate how whiteness is strategically unnamed and positioned as neutral, to examine how the universal white male queer subject is often used as a means of both diversifying otherwise normative work and representing all of queer history, and third, to recognize and confront the necessity for new forms of leadership in order to establish long-lasting systemic change and not just a change in one season. So I want to discuss each of these briefly. In my first argument, I consider how the language used or avoided in performance demonstrates universalizing and normalizing tactics, which neutralize whiteness and situate marginalized bodies as distinct and others. What is considered different necessitates a label, but with privilege comes the assumption of a universal and the avoidance of classification. So as a white theater academic and practitioner, I'm rarely expected to identify my race, and my work is rarely seen as representative of my race. In this sense, I have the privilege to remain unspecialized. I can remain neutrally queer without the need to fit my work into more specific categories of classification. Therefore, following Valerie Singh Turner and legal scholar Constance Backhouse, I note the need to declare whiteness and label white practitioners as white. Next, my paper examines how white privilege and white supremacy are perpetuated through the historical narratives we tell, resulting in a lack of recognition and further erasure of more marginalized queer artists' contributions and achievements both historically and currently. What stories, we might ask, come to represent the queer past? In the context of queer theater communities, we might consider the ways that queer and LGBT histories are enacted, not just in text but also on stage. One example, as has been said, is the recent development and productions of works that, while acknowledging whiteness, continue to memorialize and glorify a universalized white gay narrative. Though the characters might acknowledge whiteness, recognition does not excuse one from dismantling and addressing privilege. So we may ask how the erasure of particular histories and the continual propagation of dominant white gay narratives continues to benefit the white gay community in Canada at the expense of more disenfranchised groups. And this is something that Lynn Huffer talks about in her work. We may ask who is reaping the economic benefits, increased visibility, and artistic prominence through the retelling of these white essentialized stories of queer history. Finally, the problem of invitation and diversity is deeply rooted in the distribution of power and control. As Mira Sethi argues, the mainstreaming of dissent, that's her term, enables major artistic institutions to actively construct categories of racialized outsiders, employ discursive practices that establish and solidify a white Canadian sense of belonging through the categorization and isolation of culturally diverse artists. As Sethi explains, though Canadian cultural institutions appear to provide support and visibility to communities of color, they refuse to provide decision-making power in many cases to these communities. Ensuring such supervision and restriction is a means of maintaining a consistent power relation in which primarily white male artistic directors and institutions control and program spaces for predominantly white audiences. The question then becomes, how do we shift current leadership practices to support systemic change through power distribution? I end my paper by asking how we might complicate the very umbrella term queer theater. In a recent article, Jack Halberstam questioned who we are after Orlando. Halberstam writes, quote, "It might be time to break up the fantasy of the LGBT monolith," end quote. Even within the performance industry, there is a need to recognize that different practitioners experience identity, labor, and performance differently, with vastly different access to funding, to resources, to support, and to leadership roles. So after I completed writing this paper for the conference and posted it online, Toronto celebrated Pride through marches and parade with honored group BLMTO. When they performed in the parade and Black queer leaders in the community took up space and demanded their rights and their voices, many members of the white queer community demonstrated once again that anti-Black racism is still prevalent in Canada. Where there could have been support, there was disdain and defensiveness and attacks using rhetoric of threat and hostage taking. Clearly, we are still far from equity. Considering these events and recognizing the ways in which the very term queer theater assumes a unified theatrical experience, I assert here the need to expose the naturalization of whiteness in the queer community in order for white theater practitioners like myself to step back, learn how to be better allies, and support the changes needed in the queer theater and performance industry. Thank you.
Okay, there's 2 more speakers to go. We had to add an extra speaker to be in this round, so we're going a little bit longer. But before we go to the next speaker, I just want everyone to take a collective deep breath together. Okay, let's do that in. Out. In. In. One more. Hi.
So I'm Berto. I'm the theater director based out of Toronto. And between 2009 and last year, I was the artistic director of Laine Theatre of Toronto. For the past year, I had a lot of buddies and I started a master's, which I'm currently completing. It was like an international master's in arts management. Which saw me go to 4 different countries to study, explore, and examine the ways that art is defined, produced, disseminated, commodified, transactioned. And through that experience, I lived in 4 different countries. And it's interesting how every apartment that I would live in, I would go into the bathroom and I would look into the mirror. And it was like remarkable how different my face was, depending on the mirror that I was looking at. And after I've been sort of living in Toronto, I had a mirror for 7 years in like a sort of new place. And I sort of got used to my face looking the way it looked at in that mirror. And then in every new city, there was a new face looking at me. And often I didn't like looking in those mirrors. And sometimes I actually did like the way I looked in those mirrors. And I guess there's something about what David was saying around great all-white cats is a mirror. It's just a mirror. It's just a mirror. And that not always, but sometimes teaching is a kind of reflection of yourself that is offered, and that you have a relationship with, which is either acceptance, rejection, and the process, and all those things. And so yeah, I guess that's sort of listening to everybody's statements today. Thank you, all of you. Very powerful and beautiful and strong and good. And reflections that, the opportunity for reflections that each of these statements provide for me as an individual. And so in terms of, so thank you for that. In terms of sort of the document that I posted online, you can check it out if you want. It's like a very internal, personal, sort of abstract exploration of sort of where I'm at within my art practice and my own queerness, and after sort of leading an institution, kind of going back to me and sort of getting to know myself a bit better. Now that experience has occurred and has changed me. So what it is, it's basically about 35 images and artworks, and it's sort of framed by a poem by James Tate.
You may not want to read it on the plane, like I did.
Not safe for work. So yeah, I'm not going to go through the document with anything. It's a kind of offering of sort of where I'm at artistically. But inside of that, there's a little manifesto. It's like 19 words that are kind of, I guess, statements of intentionality that I'm carrying with me right now in my creative life. So I'll just share those words, and that'll be my offering. So, bodies are inherently valid. Remember death. Be ugly. Know beauty. It is complicated. Empathy. Choice. Reconstruct and reify. And reify is actually a word that I just learned. It's one of those words where you go, fuck, I wish I'd known that word before. But what it means is basically, if you don't know what it means, maybe everyone does except me, but I have to look it up. The way I found it is awesome. It means taking something that's abstract and making it concrete. And the process of doing that involves giving it materiality, giving it physicality. And I just find that to be a very beautiful word for me right now. And lastly, respect and negotiate. Thank you. Wonder who it is.
Thank you. And thank you everyone else so much, and Gein for moderating, and everyone for being here all week and giving us each other this space. I'd like to acknowledge the traditional people of this land, the unceded territory, the Coast Salish, and give honor and respect to their elders, past and present. Just to contextualize that a little bit before I dive into this, I was just at an international arts conference in Australia, ISLA, and Melbourne, and only in the past 5 years have they really been interjecting Indigenous presence at these major arts festivals, major conferences. And it was the last day, and I was up back in one of the senior members, and someone went up, and basically kind of like every time someone spoke, they did it. And this senior member, international, successful arts manager, is like, oh Jesus, not again. Do we have to do this every time? And a lot of the senior white men, members were saying this. And it really made me think about that, because yes, we think about time and going late on these things. And looking at my paper, I'm really starting to tie in some concepts that have been bouncing around of presence. And we say that because up until recently, there has been no presence of Indigenous people. Not so much here in Vancouver, because they've only been colonized for about 150 years, and that's why it's unceded. Out east, it's like 500. It's slowly coming out east. It's been great how much it is here, but it's the importance of that, to keep on reminding ourselves of that and who is here, because there isn't presence out there. there isn't presence in the media. So I just wanted to throw that out because that's been coalescing in my mind. And kind of gives the foundation for this work. Tansi, my name is Ryan Cunningham. I am originally from Edmonton, Alberta, and I am a member of the most wonderful nation in the world, the Cree Nation.
The best nation. The best nation.
Wonderful. My grandmother is from what was the Michelle Band, just north of Edmonton, before it was disenfranchised in the 50s. She has recently just got her status back from the Canadian government a few years ago at the age of 80. And so I consider myself a non-status Plains Cree, with also Dutch, Scottish, and Welsh ancestry from my mother's side. I am the current artistic director at Native Earth Performing Arts. I've been a professional theater creator, performer, producer, deviser for 20 years, and have been focusing on Indigenous performance, dance, art, work for about the last 13 years. So being asked this question about what is the state of queer theater performance in Canada 2 decades of the new millennium, I had to see that through the Indigenous gaze, performance gaze. And a lot of people have said it this week. I don't know what queer means. I was very reassured that a lot of other people have had the same response. And confused on how, from my practice, through my gaze, I respond to this. So I didn't want to write a paper. So I was like, what is this? And then I did on Monday. I got inspired, and I was like, oh! So I wrote a few paragraph thing. I was really happy with that. And it did get uploaded. But now, all week, I've been so inspired by everyone's conversations and questions and talks, it's now kind of turned into a paper. That's why I haven't just been doing emailing in the back. I've actually doing my paper. So this is what it's become. To spirit or not to spirit? That's not even a question. Queer and the identity categories of LGBTQ are a European Western construct and concept based on sexual preference and gender identity. I am two-spirited. This is an Aboriginal concept tens of thousands of years old, based on spiritual knowledge within an Indigenous universal framework. I am also Cree, which has 7 genders, or 6, depending on who you talk to, in our culture. Therefore, I am confused about how to think about queer theater over the past 2 decades. I also don't understand the term queer theater. Does that mean it's created by queer artists, theater about being queer, or theater about being queer by queer artists? Since I am an Indigenous voice on this roundtable, do I speak about two-spirited theater artists that are only creating queer theater, or do I discuss two-spirited artists creating theater? The distinction must be made, however, that two-spirited people must always be contextualized within an Aboriginal framework. To put two-spirited people within an LGBTQ framework is trying to fit a traditional Aboriginal concept within a Christianized European framework based on sexual preference and gender identity. Being two-spirited has nothing to do with sexual preference or gender identity, even though some of us do identify as being queer. By putting the 2S at the end of LGBTQ, which the Mayor of Toronto has now made official that all forms of communication will say LGBTQ2S, without providing the traditional Indigenous framework from which it exists, is actually a form of tokenism. It actually takes anything Indigenous out of what it means to be two-spirited, and therefore is a form of contemporary colonization. This speaks to another important reason why it's dangerous for our communities to have 2S included in LGBTQ. Homophobia in our communities is rampant because of Christianization, because of colonization, and because of a forced patriarchal structure imposed on our communities. When our uneducated homophobic people see 2S in LGBTQ, they can say, oh, that's the other. They're part of that LGBTQ thing, that gay thing, and that's not native. That's part of the colonizing structure. So to frame that in an Indigenous way, I'd like to tell a story so that you may interpret these ideas in your own way based on these real experiences. In 2011, I saw a Gugwe by Wawate Fogister at Buddies in Bad Times Theatre. I had started a native theatre company in Edmonton in 2009 called Alberta Aboriginal Performing Arts, and we were presenting work, and I saw that the Remount co-produced with the NAC, and went, whoa, how can we keep, I was, most native people who see this show are blown away for so many deep reasons. And I asked Ed and Wawate, how can we bring this to Canberra, what's happening? And they were like, well, I don't know. So they went to Buddies, and Buddies were like, well, we mounted it, we toured it, we're moving on. The NAC was a co-producer, said, yeah, you can have the set if you want. And Buddies allowed the production rights to go to the collective. And we created a collective, myself, Wawate, and Ed Roy, the director-dramaturg, called the Agugwe Collective. And I just want to, just because I'm there, I would love to give a shout out to Buddies for doing that. Also to Peter Hinton and Nancy Webster at the NAC, who gave us that set and stored it for a year while in their warehouse while we raised our first grants. The first presentation was in Edmonton at the organization that I started. Liz Nichols is kind of now the theater reviewer in Edmonton, and she's a lovely woman and usually quite generous in her reviews. But she said, and I'm paraphrasing because I actually went to find the review this morning, and then somehow she's taken it offline. And I would like to quote that quote that you had up there, Laine, by Sarah Ahmed. The removal of evidence of something is evidence of something. Liz Nichols said, beautiful production, well executed, great performance, but this is just another coming out story. Haven't we had enough? Aren't we moving on? Looking at it through a contemporary theater Western gaze, I can see how that's valid. We've had a lot of coming out stories. Do I think we have to stop? Of course, but I can see, I can understand why she would have perhaps that view. Oh, the Aboriginal reactions from the communities is incredible. The two-spirited teachings, the history and the knowledge that are shared and given from that play have been forgotten in our native communities. The reactions afterwards, the Q&As, people are like gushing, like, oh my God, how did we forget this? How did we not know this? Why don't we not know this? And the power of it has brought that play to communities. Saddle Lake in north of Edmonton had two-spirited people, young people in their house, in their communities and schools, so they brought it there. And the Q&A is incredible. We had a cultural leader, like elder, from one of the richest reserves in Canada. He had a relative in the Ulster Festival, didn't want to come. He's home. He came because his relative, honor his relative's request. He was in tears afterwards. Did a complete 180 and said, oh my God, this is one of the most powerful teachings I've had. Went back to his community and started teaching the power and traditional place and respected place that two-spirited people had in our community. To the point that he asked if he could bring the play next year to the reserve, and we did. And then he asked humbly if he could speak before the show and talk about how important this story is and these teachings are. And just to, which is so powerful, and so through an Indigenous gaze, this play speaks so deeply and is so powerful. But when you recontextualize it through the dominant culture gaze, you get someone like Liz Nichols saying, oh, it's just another coming out story. That's the difference. And I framed that with the LGBTQ and 2S comments that I made. One of the lines in Agugwe is, we didn't waste our people, which is such an Indigenous view of how to walk in this world, by not wasting the things that we do and take. So to come back to the question, which I assume the intent of being was, who are the native two-spirited, queer-identified theater creators who are creating work about being what queer is? I I love the comment that Harlan made the other day when he referenced Thompson Highway's work, and he said, Thompson's a Cree playwright. His stories are Cree, even though they're set in Ojibwe reserves. That's why there is always two-spirited people in his plays, because they've always been there. There's always been two-spirited people in our communities, and there's never a need to explain why or justify anything for them being there. They are a part of the community. And so to go to this question about two-spirited playwrights, native playwrights who are dealing with queer issues. I apologize, I'm sure there might be more that I'm not aware of, but in the last 35 years, I can only really count 3 that have been produced and published and are being at a professional level, and that is Thompson Highway, and that's Brad Fraser, and that's Wawate Fobister. And going back to the importance of, I would like to mention to Young as well, you commented the importance of talkbacks and the power that has, and we have found it in our work, especially when you're bringing these concepts to communities that it is a part of them. It's been so important. I just want to bring that up because I know going to different theater companies and talkbacks seem to be kind of like, okay, whatever, 10 minutes. But they're so important. So that is, yeah, that was my response to this question, and I wanted to offer that to you. And a lot of this has been concepts bouncing around in my mind that have really coalesced this week because of the words I've heard from everyone here. So thank you all. Thank you.
We have to start over here.
Yeah, I started that because I don't want to go counterclockwise.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, let's start there. Yeah. So, I guess it would be Evelyn, or
Yeah.
I'm feeling very moved.
Yeah, like it's a lot to take, so I'm just thinking about it.
Mine's a bit longer, sorry, but I just, the American coming, one of the Americans here, it's interesting to me that the conversations start, and productive, to start with politics of recognition a lot. But for me, queer is actually countering that. Usually, and I'll do it colloquially, but usually queer comes first. So it's meant to destabilize things. If you start with politics of recognition, which assumes that an individual subject, like an kind of subject, it's hard for me to think how you, to me a queer subject is kind of like it cannot be, because a subject assumes kind of stability and kind of grounding. And so when we are compelled to identify ourselves with a bunch of labels, which I totally respect, but for me that's weird in a queer framework, because those are precisely the kind of labels that we would work to somewhat undo. So I guess I've just been trying to think through that a bit. Because it's also, I would say from my perspective, and I do a lot of work on race in the US, it's really different to come here and hear these kinds of conversations. It's very generative for me, but also a bit confusing.
Resignation and facing multiplicities.
I'm feeling very thankful, and I witnessed so many people be so strong this weekend and so tough and so soft.
hearing, listening.
Yeah, similar, very grateful. Thank you for letting me listen.
I'm excited. I feel challenged.
I feel grateful for so many different voices and for the honesty.
Also grateful. Sorry. Grateful.
I think frustration. A lot of what I heard, it just brings back so much of the person. And the reason you speak of two-spirit, that community outside of Vancouver is the only safe place that I could go. And there was a strong community here until they took the doctrine down, that was from two-spirit. But that was a term for white people. Created for white people was two-spirit. Because each tribe has a different concept and it's so complicated, there's so many. Not all of them think that way or have their customs. But there's some that just have sex, you know, that's it. Yeah, so I'm talking with Danae of North. So I have a lot of experience with marginalized individuals because of my gender, even though I'm white. You don't get any privilege. Why do we have white people? Because those are the ones with the education. Those are the ones that have the talent. And they need to consciously bring in those that don't get that opportunity and include them. Because a lot of times we need to write where it doesn't matter what color you are. We want to focus on the voice and what is being said. Because our journeys are very similar.
I'm sorry, I'm going to have to stop you right now.
I'm
going to say thank you. Yeah, I'm going to say Nawe, to Miigwech, for your words.
I have a multiple question.
Or just saying one sentence of what's in your mind right now.
I really, based on what Sunny said, but I think running through everything everyone said, and we don't have to discuss this now, I hope people will think about this, the question of approval. Who do we look to for approval? Why do we look to people for approval? Do we need approval as queer people? Do we need to grant approval as queer people? And how do we do it to one another? How much does our disapproval or our approval of what someone's doing, which is outside of whether it's right or wrong, it just means how do we feel about it personally, what do we want to do with it? How important is that to being queer? Because I feel like my whole career has been built on not being approved of by even queer people at times, and that for me that is a very queer act and a very strong thing to do and something that's very difficult to do. So I just wonder how people feel about approval when you're a dramaturge, however we're saying it, and do you disapprove of a play? And if you disapprove of something within that play, how do you convey that to the writer in a way that will make you face your disapproval and make them understand what you're talking about? Because I think we use it a lot in this country and in our nature.
We're trying to keep it to a sentence, I'm sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry. So that's my question. Thank you.
Yes, totally. We gotta get back. Let's get some balance back in the circle. Let's keep that in mind about balance and space and who is speaking and all those things. Not just within this one moment, but within the entire conference. So yes, let's keep going.
Sure, I'm thinking a lot about the idea of community. For me, the word LGBTQ, and I always thought of it as one big happy family. And now I'm thinking about community in that word.
I'm glad you have listened.
Feminism? Feminism.
I'm engaged.
Queerer and queerer.
I'm feeling like a pea in a pot of pan.
stimulated.
I'm incredibly grateful and honored and humbled by your honesty, and at the same time pushed and feeling pushed. And I would love to have conversations with Sunny and about the work with our Native Indigenous people. I just finished doing a Two-Spirit talk for 19 of our Aboriginal youth, and they had no idea what Two-Spirit was within a cultural setting. And so in that conversation and holding that space, yeah, they got a teaching, but what was that teaching? So there's a level of accountability. And I also challenge this word around verify. I think that's a great and noble ambition, but when you take the sacred, you take things in and to define it, you're pulling it into the binary, and you're affirming the binary. And so there's all these other questions that I have that I would love to create spaces to talk about. But ultimately what it comes down to is I am so honored to have witnessed and be a part of this discussion. So thank you so much.
As someone who works in a multidisciplinary organization, one of the trends that we've really noticed in the last little while, particularly in visual arts and music, with the trans revolution, is the rise of visibility of trans artists. And my question is where is that in the theater?
I'm just very grateful to hear from all the individual and voices that are often unheard of. It's been very grateful to and get a chance once in a while to hear from them.
Yeah, I feel like I've been part of a lot of conversations within theater conferences that we've been having, and I've approached a lot of it with fear of not knowing where I fit into these conversations, and I feel like for the first time within this group that I've found a way, or I'm finding a way to move forward in these conversations. So a lot of stuff that you said really resonates, and yeah, so that feels really hopeful and productive.
I'm from the American South, and so it's very important for me to acknowledge what you're taught me today, that we live on stolen land, and living in the South, I have to add that it is land that was built with stolen lives.
A quote that means the world to me, you can agree with him or not, it is, scars remind us where we've been, but they don't have to dictate where we're going. So, just feeling very deeply grateful to be those who witnessed this, and a space where so many of my queer heroes are in this room, and find a lot of inspiration.
I feel called to check my privilege. I feel called to be aware of it, and also to increasingly make others aware of it. I feel also that from everything I've learned that listening happens not just with your ears, but with your body.
I'm feeling really grateful as well and touched thank you to everyone who spoke.
Feeling very inspired and a really strong sense of the direction I need to do for myself moving forward. Thank you.
I'm feeling energized and really humbled and challenged.
I'm feeling really emotional and really grateful and humbled by everything I've heard today and all of you. Thank you. Invigorated.
opportunity to listen and also to get up and meet each other and move around.
I'm feeling supported and just really appreciative of all the energy here right now.
Fine.
I'm feeling like pretty overwhelming awe and people who I was like very privileged to sit by and to hear.
Choose the verb. Dare. Yes, thinking in my practice. In my ways of seeing. Understanding.
I feel that I love people. I'm so, oh my goodness, I'm so honored to be a part of this really deeply honored to be here, and I just want to say thank you all for listening and talking. And I'm excited about the generative potential of this. I think that I'm here. And okay, yeah, this doesn't have to stay here. We can keep working it. We can keep thinking about it, and we can pass it around.
I'm feeling both like this sort of calm and quiet and like this sort of fizzly little inside of that. And kind of like I just ate a really big meal that I'm not in a food coma, but
I'm feeling like racing, and but I'm feeling a little hope the more we talk, so I'm feeling hope.
Many times this week, through an Indigenous gaze, there were so many times where I felt like where you could just replace the word queer and Indigenous, and it was exactly the same what was being talked about from the experience, and it was incredible. I also, a number of times throughout this week, I felt like many things were a reaction and a symptom of trauma, and I've been thinking of that for the last few days. There was last night or this morning where I was thinking about the events and timelines within the Indigenous community and the queer community, and I realized the similarities between the AIDS epidemic and the residential schools in the timelines, in the historical timelines of that, and thinking about the trauma that that has had on intergenerational trauma as well on both communities, and then looking at the generation now as the first generation that is not living in that trauma and has a community and support and information and awareness and identity, whichever they choose, which is incredible. And I'm really hopeful because of that.
I feel raw, but I also feel calm and sort of stretch. And I feel grateful to Eugene for setting up the energy of the circle the way you did. And I feel really grateful to how everyone
I'm used to being invisible. I genuinely feel very privileged and lucky to be a part of this, even though it technically came about as work. I feel like I'm taking a lot more from it than I think Peter, Chris, or Rob would have ever thought I could. So thank you so much for asking me to be part of it.